Now it's time to talk about lunches. And although I said breakfast is my favorite meal, I have to admit that lunches are a time that I really look forward to during the day. For me, lunch is my first break after I've been working for a few hours, and it's a really great chance for me to unwind, to just de-stress and really forget about what I've been doing for a minute or two, maybe even 20 or 30 minutes, so that I'm totally focused on just where I am and hopefully enjoying the scenery that I have around me. Now, as far as lunches go, it's really worthwhile thinking about salads and other easy-to-package options. Now, like I said before, I've been doing this lifestyle for about a year and a half now, and so I've really started to experiment with what are the easiest things I can take with me in a really portable way that I can still eat and still enjoy the flavor of. So I suggest using pre-packed foods to your advantage. And in this scenario, I'm talking about canned tuna, canned salmon, canned chicken as well, and also pre-washed salad leaves. Now, all of the above comes in very, very handy. And I want us to just focus for a second on the canned tuna, salmon, and chicken because they come in a lot of different flavors. And some of those flavors get packaged in with a lot of carbohydrates, which is unfortunate, but some companies feel that it's necessary to add a lot of sugar or a lot of starch to those tunas and those salmons to make them actually taste really good. So what I want you to do is do a quick check. All you've got to do is check the carbohydrate grams. If it's less than around 2 per serve, then you're totally clear. If it's something like 6 or 8 grams per serve, then there's probably a different flavor that you're going to be able to find, which would actually suit this lifestyle a lot better. So that's just one thing to look at. As far as the pre-washed salad leaves go, I generally try and find something that includes spinach because it's a really high quality nutrient. But you can always go for salad greens, you can go for lettuces and all those kinds of things. But if you start looking at pre-packed salads that include, for example, beets, carrots, or any other kinds of vegetables like that, just be aware of the fact that sometimes they get packaged so they're very heavy in those starchier vegetables and they might be better to avoid. So stick with the leafy green type salads and you'll be doing great. Now, I suggest packing a lunch at home to avoid being without food during the day. I hate the feeling of being somewhere and not having a meal, especially when it's mealtime and my tummy starts rumbling. So even consider packing an extra late lunch of the same size, don't even make it smaller, and if you can, adjust your schedule so you can include 2 meals between that kind of 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. range. Now, I know that's not possible for everybody, but hopefully there's a way that you can actually organize your schedule so maybe even you can split your lunch break in half, for example, and have 2 times that you can eat. What I've found through my coaching and through helping people over email and through my website is that in fact, it's that later meal that catches a lot of people out. A lot of people, they basically go from breakfast through to lunch and they might actually delay their lunch. So they might have lunch, for example, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And what this means is there might be 5 or 6 hours between breakfast and lunch. And that's not the end of the world, but it does mean that things like cravings will start coming and attacking you if you try and delay things that much on a regular basis. So what I recommend to them and what I recommend to you is that you try and organize your morning and your afternoon so that you can get those 2 meals in. What I've found is that if you miss that later meal and you try and hold out until dinner time, the evening can be an incredibly difficult time because you've actually left yourself and you've got to the point where you're so hungry, the next meal doesn't really satisfy that hunger. And that's when you start looking in those other cupboards. That's when you start thinking about going out for some different kinds of food. And that's also when you start thinking that maybe, this food isn't really satisfying you. The reality is that if you try and stick to this 4-meal schedule and you adjust your quantities of food, it can definitely satisfy your hunger needs. But if you try and stretch out your day so you only have 3 meals, you'll need to be eating very large meals to last those distances of time, and it just might not be possible to have that much energy in one meal with this kind of food. So if you can, like I say, try and include those 2 meals during the day. Now, with each meal, I want you to make sure you're getting at least 25 grams of protein in each. And that means combined with the meat or with the protein source that you're eating, as well as with the beans or the lentils that you're adding to that meal. It's generally not terribly difficult. For example, a tiny little tin of tuna generally has around 10 to 15 grams of protein just in that little tin. So if you add in some beans, you should easily be able to get 25 or 30 grams of protein per meal. Remember that we're always adjusting according to our hunger, so this is just a guideline, just a minimum that I'd like to set for you. Now, if you want, you could, of course, use some extra food that you've made with a dinner for one of the meals. And this is actually a really great routine to get into. So if you're cooking a dinner for yourself, for example, one evening, just make a double serve and then take that as one of your lunches. If you're cooking a dinner for a few people, always just make an extra serve. It's not difficult to do, you save a lot of time doing it, and it's also going to keep your meals nice and interesting. Plus, there's a few meals that actually taste better when they're reheated the next day. So now it's time for us to look at some sample lunches, and my mouth is watering just looking at this list. So to start off with, we have a meal which really is one of these delicious combinations of quite light ingredients, gives us a lot of flavor, and it also gives us some really, really high quality nutrients. So the first meal we have is cold chicken breast, lettuce and spinach, some sliced avocado, some red kidney beans, drained of course, out of a can, and some olive oil and lemon juice. Now you could throw in a little bit of salt if you wanted, and you could throw in a little bit of pepper as well. This is a fantastic meal that you can take with you easily in one of those little containers that seals up. And you know, if it's refrigerated, for example, overnight, it's probably going to last a few hours in a bag somewhere or even in a cupboard somewhere, and it's not really going to go that bad. There's a lot of really great flavors in this meal, and I think this is probably one that you'll like to enjoy potentially a few times every week. But I'll leave it to you and your taste buds to let you know what you prefer. The second meal is a different take on using some sandwich meat and using some spinach and that kind of thing, and it also includes a really nice tomatoey flavor. So we start off with some sandwich meat like ham, for example. Just make sure it's ham that's not cured with sugar or nitrates. And you can use the regular old sliced ham is probably the easiest way, and what I like to do is just slice it up into small pieces so it's easy to eat just with a fork. So I can eat it straight out of that container rather than having to put it on a plate and go to that much effort. Now I like to add to that ham some black beans and some spinach and some tomato salsa. Now I always try and get the tomato salsa that doesn't have sugar added, and I try and avoid ones that has corn in it as well. If you get a few little bits of corn, it's not the end of the world. They're not really going to affect you too badly. But of course, generally we say don't eat a whole cob of corn because it's quite a starchy vegetable. Now this meal is a really great one, again, that you can start off with in the fridge. You can have it there for a couple of days and then just grab it and go whenever you need it. It's got a really good flavor, and it also works quite well with pepper, or if you like to add some other kinds of spices, for example, cayenne pepper or something along those lines. The next one is a really easy one to bring with you, and this one actually I've used when I've been working, for example, in an office where I could drain tins of things. So rather than package my lunch all together to start with, I've actually just brought separate things, a couple of cans with me, and then a little Ziploc bag. And this is a really easy one to do that with, quickly drain a couple of cans and then really enjoy a meal from it. So I start off with a flavored can of tuna, and generally I go for something like a lemon pepper, but I'll let you experiment with different flavors that are nearby to you. Then I'll have some sliced red bell pepper and some lettuce that I've brought with me from home, and then just a simple old can of white beans. All I do is drain the tuna, drain the white beans, throw it all together in a bowl or even in a portable container that I've brought for myself, and it's a really, really tasty, delicious meal. Doesn't need any cooking or anything like that, and it's so easy to make, and it's so delicious to eat that you might end up eating this quite a few times each week. The next meal we've got is an egg-based meal. So in case you're a little bit sick of eggs, this might not be for you. But if you love eggs, this one is a really, really easy one to bring with you. And this one actually works quite well if you heat it up or if you have it cold. So I start with 3 hard-boiled eggs, and generally speaking, I'll just dice them up into small cubes. Then I'll add some black beans, again with some tomato salsa and some fresh spinach. Now I can put this in a little container, make sure it's probably a glass dish or a very microwave safe container, and I'll just heat it up for a few minutes. And what that does is, it just warms up those eggs, get them nice and hot, get the black beans with the tomato salsa nice and hot, and it'll cook the spinach because of the moisture that's in the container. This is a really delicious meal. It's quite a hearty meal, so it's a good one to have if the weather's a little cooler, or you can have it more like a salad, cold, and it's a totally different flavor. Last but not least is a really, really delicious lunch. Now this one does require a little bit more preparation, but once you've done the preparation at home, it actually works out to be a really easy one to take with you. So my suggestion here is to create a baked quiche or frittata and use eggs, diced peppers, some spices, some white beans, and some spinach, and actually bake that at home to start with. Now this is a good one to do on the weekend, and then you'll have a few pieces, potentially 4 or 6 pieces, ready to go for the week. So this is really easy to reheat in a microwave. I always suggest adding a little bit of water so you don't dry out the food too much when you microwave it, and just heat it up for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And this is a delicious way to eat something that tastes a little bit gourmet and something that's really going to hit that spot if you're feeling like you'd like to be out for lunch, for example. You can always put some spinach on the side, some fresh spinach, or maybe even some fresh salad greens on the side of this once it's reheated. And this is a meal that I really enjoy, so hopefully you like it too. And it's the kind of thing you can do once every couple of weeks and just have that knowing it's good to go in the fridge and you can just take it with you wherever you go that day. So that wraps up the sample lunches, and I really encourage you to check out the info sheet because there's lots of ideas there. And what I'm trying to do is spark your imagination so that you've got some interesting ideas to go with so you can really create some things that totally appeal to you that you'd love to eat. Because remember, success with this lifestyle is in part down to enjoying the foods that you're eating.